Good afternoon, Year 10s and 11s. Welcome to the first masterclass for English Language Paper 2. Today's masterclass is going to focus on question 2, specifically Assessment Objective 1. For this masterclass, you're going to need two texts, which has been also attached to this resource tab. You are going to need The Death Zone by Matt Dickinson and London Snow, which is an extract from a diary written by Arthur Munby, published in 1867. It is, we are working from a specimen paper from AQA as well, so it will be available, like I said, on the Google Classroom, and if you have problems finding it, just please ask your teacher. So today we're going to understand we're learning to synthesize and summarize key ideas and information from two texts and make detailed inferences. Our keywords are synthesize, compare, and inference. So you may want to get started, think about different types of connectives that you can use to compare, what structure you should use for question 2, and what does it mean to synthesize, okay? You also have your success criteria there on the board. On the screen in front of you as well, depending on your target grade as well. So some of you guys, may just need to kind of get on board with a grade 3. Some of you guys will have a target grade of a 4 and 5, where you need to make clear and consistent comparisons of the text, making clear inferences. And what the exam board mean by clear is that it's well explained, okay? You don't just say something really brief like, it's just that it's really cold. All right, it suggests it's really cold because the people can see their breaths and they need heavy coats to keep them warm. Okay, that is a clear comparison and a clear inference as well. Sorry. You also need really well selected evidence too, so really thinking about the best evidence that you can give to support your ideas. Many of you guys may be aiming for a grade 6, 7, maybe an 8, and for that you need to make really detailed and perceptive comparisons and make really detailed and perceptive inferences as well. So explain like in real detail, giving more than one layer of inference perhaps, and use really apt and precisely chosen evidence. So you start to integrate kind of single word evidence from the text into your analysis as well. And it's kind of seamless, the text and your response. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so this assessment objective is assessed across both of the papers. You can see it's assessing question 1. It is just basically, can you pick out key ideas from the text, and can you make inferences? Okay, obviously making inferences kind of goes across AO2 and all the others as well, but that's the only thing that you have to do for these questions. So the can you make inferences is really just assessed there in paper 2 question 2 as well. And it's only worth 8 marks, but sometimes those 8 marks can make a big difference when it comes to your grade boundaries as well. So don't dismiss it that it's a low mark question. I don't need to put in as much effort. You do. Okay, you don't spend a lot of time on this question. It's about 10 minutes. But it's pretty straightforward about what you have to do. So AO1 is to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. Right? Explicit is obvious information and implicit is hidden information. To select and synthesize evidence from different texts. So to synthesize something, and I have a little filter there, is you take all the information and you get the best bits out of it. Okay, the key bits of information. Right? So to synthesize, take it all in and pull out the key bits of information from both of the texts. And you have to do some comparisons as well. Okay, but that's all you have to do for this question. It is really easy to get question 2 and question 4 mixed up, and I've seen it a few times in papers that I've marked where people start to talk about the writer's attitudes and ideas and perspectives in question 2, and that's not what you have to do. So question 2, it is only picking out key information, making inferences about it, and just making comparisons. AO3, which is writers' ideas and attitudes, is question 4. So one way I try to think about it, or I teach it, is question 2 will ask you about the what of the texts, the the surfboards, whereas question 4 will ask you about the kind of the activity, the surfing. Okay, question 2 will ask you about bikes, whereas question 4 will ask you about the different attitudes to biking. Question 2 will ask you about the types of animals, whereas question 4 will ask you about the farming. Okay, so think about like the what, the objects for question 2. All right, and then kind of the wider activity and how they feel about it is question 4. Okay. So you can see the mark scheme is also there as well. In blue are kind of the keywords that exam boards and teachers use as well when determining a level. So it's very similar to what I showed you at the start of the lesson as well. But you can see it's pretty straightforward. You only are assessed on 3 things: making inferences, picking out details, and making comparisons. Okay, one thing I would suggest is to really pay attention to what the question's asking you. I would say most of the time it asks you about differences, but it could ask you about similarities. Okay, but if the question asks you about differences, write about differences. Don't write about similarities because it won't get you any marks. Okay, so you have to be really focused on the question. Okay. So synthesizing, what do you have to do? So you'll have 2 objects, okay, in the text, and you have to kind of pull together what's similar or different about them. Okay, so these 2 objects, okay, a horse and a dog, similar things about them. Well, they're both animals. They both have 4 legs. They can both be kept as pets. All right, really easy. How are they different? Well, one is, a household pet, okay, and the other one is, needs a barn, okay. The other one can be kept in a house. What else is different about them? Well, one requires a lot of maintenance and upkeep, a horse, okay, whereas a dog doesn't, okay. Something else is different. Not as many people will have horses as pets, whereas dogs are far more common. Okay? You could even go so far as to say, one has hooves and a mane and another one doesn't. Okay? So think about the actual objects about it. Same thing with this. Okay? A campfire and an electric hob. Okay? Similar things about them. They're both used for cooking. Okay, they both create heat. Simple things like that. Differences about it. Well, one requires wood as fuel. The other one requires electricity. The fire is very hard to maintain to a steady temperature, whereas a hob you can maintain a steady temperature. Okay, things like that. Same thing like these 2. Okay, you have a think about it. How are these 2 similar and how are they different? Okay, hopefully some ideas that you picked up on. They're similar, they're both writing instruments. Okay, how are they different? One is plastic and has 4 different colored pens, inks, right? The other one is wooden and only has 1 color. Okay, the material as well, one is ink, one is graphite. All right, one requires no sharpening, the other one does. Okay, so things like that. You have to think about similarities and differences, the what of it. So when you have your texts, how do you start to kind of pull together your ideas? So one way is to do perhaps like a simple graph like this. Source A, what does it infer? Source B, what does it infer? And you need to think of 2 points, all right, 2 points of comparison for this question. right? AQA advises, maybe think about what you can see and what you can do. So if we think about these pens, okay, what can we see? I can see one plastic pen with 4 different colored inks. I can see one pencil with graphite, okay? What do they do? One is used for writing, the other one is used for drawing, perhaps, okay? So we have to think about those sorts of things. What can you see? What can you do? It's just a simple way. I like to think it's the what, okay? However, in an exam, you're not going to have time to do that as well. It's only an 8-mark question and you have 10 minutes, so you don't want to spend lots of time planning this, and you shouldn't have to, but perhaps a good way to do some quick comparisons is to do a Venn diagram. I do love a good Venn diagram. Also brings in your numeracy skills as well. So think about source A, source B, okay? And you can think about, right, what's similar about them, how are they different? Okay, so simple like Venn diagrams sometimes can help you gather some ideas. So you're going to read 2 texts. You're going to read The Death Zone and London Snow, okay? My top tips for when you first read the texts and approach them is to first of all, read the question first and identify the focus. Is it similarities or differences you need to synthesize and pull together? Okay, like I said, most of the time it'll probably be differences. Okay, that's been a pretty consistent theme with AQA for the past couple of papers. As you read as well, you want to highlight or underline sentences and phrases to help you answer that question. So if it was on surfboards, what are the differences in surfboards? You want to start to underline anything that describes the surfboards. If it's about boats, you want to start to underline anything that has to do with boats. I don't know what it is about AQA in the past couple of papers. It's been very kind of sport-based texts as well, so I think it's quite easy to describe the what's of what you use for that sport, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind. Okay, and like I said, really focus on the objects of the text. That's really going to help you out. Okay. So you're going to read both of the texts. I'm not going to read it with you. If you'd like to pause this video and take 5 minutes, okay, no more than 10, to read both of those texts. And when you have finished reading both of those texts, please come back to this video. All right, thank you everybody for doing that. Okay, so 2 texts. These are quite common texts that you would find for AQA as well. So one of them is going to be kind of pre 20th century. Okay, so this one is in the 1800s, or source B is in the 1800s, described in London, and the other one will always be a little bit more modern. And you can see this Matt Dickinson text is it's been written in the past 20 years or so. I forget exactly the date. 1998. There you go. About 22 years ago. No, 12 years ago. Sorry. So one will be quite recent and the other one will be a little bit older as well. Okay. So thinking about, this structure, okay, what are similarities and differences about this? So if the question is this, the effects of the weather on people in both sources are very different. Use details from both sources to write a summary of the different ways people are affected by the weather. Okay, so again, it's about the what. You have to talk about the weather. All right, and well, you may think, well, both of these has to do with like storms, so that's similar. So why can't I write about the similarities? Okay, yes, both of them are about storms and snow, but you have to write about the different ways people are affected by it. So it is, what does the storm do to people? Okay, that is your focus for it. So some ideas that I came up with, is how threatening it is. In source A, it actually kills people, whereas in source B, it's not, it's quite superficial. The traffic has to stop, and they're a bit cold, they have to stamp and blow on their feet. Okay, you also want to think about how it inconveniences people, perhaps. All right, it's quite in source A, the storm blows away their tents, bends them out of shape, and it's nothing like they've never seen before. Okay, it's quite bullying and pummeling as well. It's a driving fury of snow. Okay, whereas in source B, it people's beards get frozen. Okay, it's quite superficial. So thinking about what you would do. All right, so when I was reading it, I underlined some evidence. So the cost of the storm, the consequences of it. In source A, there's a consequence to life. In source B, though, it's quite a superficial cost as well. All right, and and another point, how vulnerable people are in source A versus the inconvenience of it. Like I said, all traffic stopped. So I went through and I was underlining key information. And the next thing you want to try and do is to think about the inferences. So what does it suggest? So if we look at source A, the consequences to life. So more than 30 climbers were fighting for their lives. There was 8 fatalities. What does that suggest? All right, it's quite dangerous, and it easily causes fatalities, okay, no matter how much you prepare, because these people who go climbing Everest prepare for months, and they have highly specialized equipment, and they're there with Sherpas, and there's very key and specific things that you have to do when climbing Everest, okay. Despite all of this, the storm killed 8 people, okay, because it was so strong. All right, what could you say for source B? It was quite superficial. My beard froze and the nape of my neck froze, and a headache came on. Okay, so what does that suggest? It's not life-threatening. They could easily survive this. Okay, it's quite superficial. Your beard will unfreeze again. Okay, so those are just some ideas. I'm just talking through my thought process. Another point, the vulnerability of the people and how it inconveniences them. Well, in source 8, it was ripping the tents, in a blinding fury of driving snow. That's your only shelter, and it's being ripped apart. Think about the word. Don't comment on language, but ripping really shows you just how powerful it was. And I like this quote, the wind became a constant bullying force as well. So what does that suggest to us? All right, the people, for all the preparedness, there was no match for the storm, okay? It was powerful, it was punishing. They couldn't escape it, and they were at the mercy, really, of the storm, okay? And the same thing, like how in source B, what does the snow do? It just inconveniences people, so like all traffic stopped. It says that there was no cabs, no omnibuses, no wagons at all. So it caused some minor disruption to the city, and people couldn't get about, but people still walk around because it was only 6 to 8 inches. Okay, it fell without force or sound, so it almost sounded enjoyable to me, and it didn't affect any people. Okay. So those are just like some ideas, me talking through my thought process. I thought also some other things you could think about, the locations of the people as well. So in your inferences, you maybe want to think about one's on Mount Everest, which is a very remote and treacherous place, and the other one is the City of London, so a very urban area with lots of people about and structures and systems in place. And also the amount of people you want to think about. So there was very few people on Mount Everest. I know it says about 30, but which may sound like a lot, but not really when you're on a mountain. It's quite a few people versus a city of a few million people. Okay, maybe not in 1800s, but it was a couple 100,000 perhaps at that point. Okay, so you maybe want to weave some of those ideas into your inferences. So what I want to do is I want to show you some model responses, okay, and show you what would be a level 2, which would get you about a grade 3, and I will show you a level 4, which would be a good strong, sorry, not a level 4, a level 3, which would be a good kind of grade 4, grade 5, maybe a 6, because we don't know how the grade boundaries shift. And I'll show you a level 4, which would be a top end response, which would definitely be a grade 6, 7, 8, or 9. Okay? So this first one is a level 2. Okay, and on the side I have the mark scheme criteria, and I've color coded it. So attempts at some inferences, selects appropriate references, and statements that show the difference between it. Okay, and right away you can see here that it is lacking inferences. There's very little you telling me anything implicit. Okay, in source A, when the storm arrives, it traps 30 climbers in the death zone. And after a night from hell, 8 of them die. Okay, so there's some appropriate references there. That's about it. This is different to source B because no one is killed because of the weather. The snow makes the writer's beard freeze and everyone has to put warm clothes on. Okay, that should be a bit green. That's a reference to the text. But that's it. That is, this red bit is the only level of inference that this response gives. Everything else is explicit. Okay, source A says this, source B says that. Source A says this, source B says that. Okay. This would obviously get a very low response. It would maybe get 3 out of 8 marks. Okay. For this question, you should write 2 paragraphs. If this was all I saw, this one paragraph, I would probably give it 3 out of 8, and that would maybe be a bit generous. Okay, you need to develop things a lot better. Okay, it does show the differences between them. It does use evidence from the text, and for that, you know, it's all right. But the red bit, the inferences, is how you really get the marks for this question. So let's look at a level 3 then, and this would probably relate to about a grade 4, grade 5. Source A shows the effect that a sudden storm can have on the people of Mount Everest. For example, 30 climbers became trapped in the death zone, fighting for their lives. 3 Indian climbers are stranded, exhausted, and with their oxygen supplies running out, which suggests that the weather has taken them by surprise because they are obviously not prepared for the storm. By the end of the following day, 8 people have been killed, and from this we can infer that the weather can be fatal. If people don't have shelter, they will die. However, in source B, the weather is not dangerous. It does result in people wearing extra layers of clothing, and some even stay indoors. But those who do go out only have to blow on their fingers and stamp their feet to keep the cold out. The main difference between the effects of source A and those in source B is that the storm on Everest can kill people, but in London the snow is more likely just to freeze your beard and turn your hair white. Okay, so you can see here there is more inferences being made. Okay, if you look at this specifically, all right, the paragraph starts off with a point of comparison. It gives some evidence, and it makes inferences. Okay. You know, people are fighting for their lives. People are stranded and exhausted, which suggests this, this, and this. Okay. And it starts to kind of give more layers of inference. You know, by the end of the day, we can infer that the weather can be fatal. If people don't have shelter, they will die. So it's starting to become a bit more clear here, the inferences, and it's a lot more relevant, right? However, in source B, so there's a nice shift and comparison to the second text. All right, the weather's not as dangerous, so there's your point of your point basically. It does result in people wearing extra layers of clothes and staying indoors, blowing their fingers, stamping their feet. There's my evidence. Okay. It does need some more inferences there, okay? But that last sentence is also quite good. It's good practice just to tie up the differences between the two texts just at the end. So the main difference between the effects in source A and those in B is the storm on Everest can kill, but in London it's just likely to freeze your beard and turn white. Okay, that is a nice sentence. I quite like that. I would prefer it if it was at the start of the paragraph. So the paragraph starts off with a clear comparison, and then it goes into kind of your evidence and your inferences. But an examiner would look at that and they would say that is probably a good 5 out of 8 for this one. Okay, so this would get 5 out of 8, maybe a 6, but I would say more a 5. So for this one, a level 4, so this is a top end response. You can see it's a lot more detailed. There's more red, so there's more inferences that are being made in this. Okay, there is some more evidence and textual references that are integrated throughout the response as well. So source A conveys the horrific consequences of a sudden storm on Mount Everest when 30 climbers become trapped in the death zone and are left exposed and fighting for their lives. 3 Indian climbers are stranded, exhausted, and with their oxygen supplies running out, which suggests that they were caught unaware by the unexpected severity of the weather. Maybe more significantly, 2 commercial expeditions were strung out between the South Col and the summit, showing the weather attacks both recreational climbers and business enterprises which would consider the safety of their clients as important. This implies the effects are catastrophic for even the most prepared of people, because there were 8 fatalities, the greatest loss of life in any 24-hour period on the peak. This is different to source B, which focuses on a less traumatic event. A heavy snowfall in London in the 1800s. The people are cold and wrapped in thick coats, but the effects are not life-threatening. Even the homeless girl who sleeps on the step is only as cold as fog, rather than hypothermic. Most people stay inside, but those who do venture out are suffering little more than frozen beards, headaches, and cold fingers. Overall, the people in source B have some sense of control over the weather, and it merely inconveniences their daily lives, whereas in source A, it exposes the vulnerability of the climbers and is life-threatening. Okay, again, I would prefer if there was a comparative sentence at the start of this paragraph. And some of you guys may have noticed, so for instance, down here, little more than frozen beard, headache, and cold fingers. Okay, that is green. It's a textual reference, so it's words directly from the text. It's kind of paraphrased and put into the argument as well, and that is also perfectly acceptable as well. Okay. So you can see, if we start at the top, you can see it does give a statement. Okay, there's horrific consequences to a sudden storm. Okay, there's evidence, they're fighting for their lives, stranded and exhausted with oxygen, which suggests they were caught unaware by the unexpected severity of the storm. And there's some more evidence, this showing the weather attacks both recreational climbers and business enterprises who would consider the safety of the clients as important. Okay, that is some more detail, so you're just giving extra layers of information. Okay, this implies the effects are catastrophic, even for the most prepared of people. Okay, and then this is different to source B. Okay, and I shift to the next text as well. All right, this is a good response. This would maybe get 7 out of 8 marks as well. Okay, I think it could do with just a bit more inferences as well, and perhaps some more perceptive differences as well in statements. Just if the structure of the paragraph is a bit better, it'd get like probably a good 8 out of 8. Okay, but all of you guys are capable of this level of work. It just requires you to keep following through with your inferences. Okay, I like to think like when you make an inference, it's kind of like you're skipping stones on water. You want that stone to keep traveling as far as it can, okay, before it runs out of steam kind of and it falls into the water. You know, if you skip a stone and it just goes plunk into the water, you know, that's kind of what we get here, but that's it, plunk. Right? But, you know, here we've got maybe 2 or 3 skips in the stone, and then here the stone is skipping about 4, 5, 6 times. Okay, it's really going far. And as an English teacher and examiners, this is what we like to see. We like to see your ideas and what you think about the text. Okay, so we at Stratford High, we have this structure that we would like you guys to use to answer the question. This should not be unfamiliar. All of your English teachers have shown you this before. Please start your paragraph with a comparative sentence. So in source A, the storm is life-threatening, whereas in source B, it is merely an inconvenience for the people. If you start off that way, you're showing the examiner that you are thinking about your comparison straight away and you understand the main ideas of the text. Okay? So the writer suggests that the people were unprepared, give your evidence, and then your inferences, you know, this suggests or implies or indicates or this could show, and try to give more than one layer of inference. Use a nice connective to shift to your next text. Okay, so in contrast, source B, the writer suggests that the snow just stopped traffic. All right, and there's your evidence, and this could suggest that it was still manageable to get about. Okay. All right, and then it's just nice to tie things up at the end, just with the final sentence, which is different to source A. Okay, it just shows that you're thinking about those comparisons throughout. It's integrated well between everything. Okay, so if you want to have a go at practicing this question, okay, you can have a go at this, and any English teacher will be happy to look at your work and to give you some feedback on this as well. So the success criteria, make some really clear points of comparison. I know I've given you guys some points of comparison there. Think about your topic sentences that compare to the point. Have some well-selected evidence as well. Try not to put in whole sentences. Try to put in the best bits of your sentence, okay? So, you know, for source B, when I said all traffic except a foot was stopped, no cabs, no omnibuses, no wagons, all of that is very relevant, okay, but you want to pick out the best bits. So all traffic, and maybe you use ellipses, ... was stopped, okay, and there was no transportation moving, okay. So really kind of focus on the best bits of your evidence and detailed inferences that explain what the evidence suggests, okay. Use the word because in there. So this suggests that people were still able to get about because people were still walking about and could still get about the city. Okay, try that. Just try using the word because, and it will automatically just push your explanation on. And then use your connective, shift to the other text, do the same thing, and tie it up again. And you need to do that ×2, okay, for a good response. And when you do the mock exam, you'll see how much space you have to write. You have 2 sides of A4, okay, and you know, you can make use of those 2 sides. So if you want to pause now, you can put a timer on for 10 minutes, okay, when you do your response. All right, come back to this video and we'll do our plenary. All right, thank you guys. So hopefully you guys took 10 minutes to do that. And hopefully you found it a bit easier than what you've done before. These texts are not the easiest to pull together as well, but I wanted to give something a little bit challenging to make you work, and hopefully then you'll find the mock exam quite easy. So as some self-assessment, so one way that you can figure out how well you're doing is to pick apart your answer. So get out 3 different colored highlighters or colored pencils, or maybe just 3 different colored pens, Okay, and start to pick apart your response, kind of like what I did with the model responses. So highlight your comparative point, highlight your evidence, and then highlight the bits that show your inferences and because as well, and see, do you have lots of inference? Okay, or is it kind of just a point and some evidence, maybe a bit of an inference? Okay, and then think, have I made something that looks like a level 2? Have I made some attempt to compare? Have I made some attempt to make inferences? Or maybe, it's a bit better. You can see there's a fair amount of highlighted inferences there. Is it clear? Okay, have you used the word because when explaining those inferences? Okay, or is it perceptive and detailed? You really have focused on those key details. You have really focused on your evidence and giving more than one layer of inference. Okay, and you can see what you have to kind of do, hopefully, to get better. Okay. For further help and information, you can always have a look on the GCSE English Language Revision Classroom. Under Paper 2, there are some revision videos from Mr. Bruff, and he does go over Question 2, Paper 2. He is a good source as well. There is also GCSE Pod that you can go to as well. You don't have to wait for teachers to assign you podcasts to look at. So there is one on reading skills, and you can look at like comparing texts and making inferences as well. You can always ask your class teachers as well for some extra work or to look over your work if you need to. There's some practice papers that are also on this GCSE revision classroom too that you're more than welcome to use as practice, and again to give to your teacher or whoever to look at for some feedback. Okay, hopefully you guys have found this useful, and we hope you've enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much for coming and watching this video as well. Any further questions, please ask any of your English teachers. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.